Great. So now we're live on YouTube. I'll give it another minute or so here and we'll get started.
Yeah.
I didn't even know you could do that. Technology.
Yeah.
Picked up a few skills during this whole COVID stuff.
You can teach an old dog new tricks, right?
Oh.
Great. Can you all still hear me?
Yep.
Yes.
All right, great. So let's get started if you're all ready. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us for our final Black River Watershed Wednesday webinar. My name is Jennifer Harville. I'm a natural resources specialist with the New York State Tug Hill Commission in Watertown. Welcome to all of you. Next year, I hope we see you all in person. A couple of things before we get started. First, you're all muted, but please use the chat to ask questions during the webinar, and then after the webinar, we can allow people to talk and interact that way. Second, this webinar is being recorded and will be shared on our YouTube channel and on our conference page. And the link to that Black River Watershed page will be provided in the follow-up emails that you'll get from me. So please hang on to those for your reference. Plus, I did drop that in the chat for you. So you can view all our past presentations there. Your colleagues at the Tug Hill Commission, the Lewis, Hamilton, Herkimer, Jefferson, and Oneida County Soil and Water Conservation Districts and the New York State DEC Region 6 have put this series together for you, and we hope you have found it informative and interesting. Today's webinar features presentations from Hamilton and Herkimer County Soil and Water Conservation Districts. Take it away, Nichelle.
Okay, our first presenter today is Caitlin Stewart, who is a district manager at the Hamilton County Soil and Water Conservation District. She's presented for us before. Caitlin will present today an overview of a green infrastructure project implemented at Inlet's Arrowhead Park. And Caitlin will also provide an update to the Hamilton County's lake monitoring project. Without further ado, Caitlin, it's all yours.
Michelle, thank you for that introduction. I'm going to pull up my presentation here. And I hope everyone can hear me okay. We have our district team who's just returned from hydro seeding, and they are washing our hydro seeder right outside my window. So we may have some extraneous noise come in here, but I hope everyone can hear me clearly. It is wonderful to be here with you all this afternoon, and there are many people to thank for this year's Black River Watershed Wednesday webinars. The New York State Tug Hill Commission, the Lewis, Jefferson, Oneida, and Herkimer County Soil and Water Conservation Districts, as well as the New York State Department of Environmental Conservation, Region 6. And I want to give a shout out to Nichelle and to Jennifer for hosting, for running through practice sessions, and for getting all of the awesome outreach materials to our partners to help promote this year's Watershed Webinar Wednesday. And I want to echo what Jennifer said, here's to 2022 and getting back to in-person trainings. I want to introduce myself. As Nichelle mentioned, my name is Caitlin Stewart, and I'm the district manager for the Hamilton County Soil and Water Conservation District. Our district office is located in the beautiful Adirondack Park, and we service the Black River watershed in the northern portion, including the Fulton chain of lakes, as well as Lime Kiln. I am an outdoor enthusiast. I love recreation. Here's my dog Artemis. He's a very good boy. In the wintertime, he takes me skijoring, and this time of year, we have the canoe out for some adventures on our lakes. I also want to recognize my husband, Matt Sipes, who is very supportive and who has really encouraged me to pursue this career in conservation. And I want to say again how glad I am that all of you have joined us today. The purpose of this presentation is to provide you with an overview of a green infrastructure project that our team installed in the town of Inlet's Arrowhead Park. And then I'll transition to provide an update for our lake monitoring program. And the GI project, as well as our lake monitoring program, are protecting the water quality in the Black River watershed. So getting right into our stormwater control and green infrastructure project. Here is a Google Earth image of Arrowhead Park. You'll see Arrowhead Park is the mid right-hand side of your screen. It's that red flag on the map. Arrowhead Park is a high traffic area in the town of Inlet. This area houses the municipal building, a large parking lot, a tennis court, and it also has access to the public beach. And the issue is stormwater runoff collects in this area, and it normally would run directly off into the 4th and 5th Lake channel. So again, this area has the large parking lot, it houses the municipal buildings, and this was a great site location to install green infrastructure to protect our water quality against stormwater pollution. An introduction to the project. We installed green infrastructure for the purpose of capturing stormwater runoff from impervious surfaces. As I mentioned before, the parking lot and the roofs of the municipal area were the perfect storm for stormwater runoff. And the idea was to capture stormwater runoff from these impervious surfaces, prevent flooding, and decrease pollutants from ever entering the 4th and 5th Lake channel. This was also a high traffic area, which will provide for a wonderful educational opportunity. Our staff are working on a large poster that will be erected at the park describing the project. So getting some education out there is very important to showcasing what green infrastructure can do for sites like this. We consulted with our partners at the Warren County Soil and Water Conservation District. They have expertise in green infrastructure. They worked with our district technician, Lenny Croot, to survey the site and to select the best green infrastructure type for this particular setting. And it was decided that True Grid Porous Plus permeable pavers were the best type of green infrastructure for this project site. These pavers are 100% permeable. They detain water under the surface, and they also promote stormwater management. And I have a sample here. These are what the pavers look like. Here, let me see if I can get it there. So this is a sample of what the actual pavers look like. And they basically soak up stormwater pollution and help prevent aquatic pollution. So the environmental issues at Arrowhead Park that this green infrastructure addresses. So during a rain or snowmelt event, this water is running over the parking lot, it's flowing off over the roofs, and it's collecting in this area. It's puddling on impervious surfaces, and it also is flowing directly into the 4th and 5th Lake channel. And the photograph on the left is a picture of that channel. A lot of boats are moored there. People access Fourth Lake with kayaks and canoes, or they traverse the channel to Fifth Lake. And so this is a very high traffic area. It sees a lot of boat action. It sees a lot of recreationists canoeing or kayaking. So this stormwater runoff is carrying pollution, and this pollution could include automotive fluids, fertilizer, pet waste, and road salt. And eventually all of those pollutants were making their way into the Fourth and Fifth Lake channel, or being absorbed directly by what little grass was in the area. And the stormwater is now, because of this project, infiltrating directly into these true grid pavers, rather than flowing directly into the Fourth and Fifth Lake channel. Partnerships were really essential to the success of this green infrastructure project. The Warren County Soil and Water Conservation District provided consultation for selecting the best green infrastructure to be installed at Arrowhead Park. The Town of Inlet Highway Department and their Parks and Recs crew provided crew members as well as equipment to assist with project installation. Our funding came from a variety of different sources. We received state aid in the form of a project called Part B funding. So we received $6,000 to cover the expense of project materials, the true grid pavers, the stone, the mats. The Town of Inlet Highway Department provided the remaining funds for the project. And the Town of Inlet Highway Department and their Parks and Recs crew also provided in-kind services in the form of crew members to operate the equipment to get this green infrastructure installed. And finally, the Finger Lakes Lake Ontario Watershed Protection Alliance provides funding to cover our staff time to get this project on the ground, and also to create presentations and the poster to promote this type of green infrastructure. So getting into the nitty-gritty of how our team installed the green infrastructure at Arrowhead Park. Step one was to survey the property and look for areas that would benefit from these pavers, from this type of green infrastructure. So you survey the area, you look for where this green infrastructure could effectively be installed. Step two, and this is depicted in the picture at the very lower left-hand side of your screen. Crew members remove impervious surfaces by excavating the landscape to the desired depth. Step three, and this is depicted in the second picture to the right with the excavator there. Our team members laid down geotextile fabric liner, and this geotextile liner is acting as a barrier between the subsoil and between the rocks. Step three, the crew members placed a uniform stone that was 3/4 of an inch in diameter on top of that liner and tamped everything down. Step four was to install the True Grid Pro Plus permeable pavers on top of that rock base. And finally, step six is to place uniform stone 1/2 inch in diameter on top of the pavers and tamp everything down. So the final project photograph is on the right there. Lenny's tamping down all of that uniform stone 1/2 inch in diameter on top of the permeable pavers. go over some field notes for this project. I mentioned that rocks of the same size were used in different layers, either 3/4 of an inch or 1/2 of an inch. And that is important to limit compaction and to also increase the amount of void space in those layers. Void space is what's allowing stormwater runoff to be absorbed at this site location. So these porous spaces, these void spaces, are allowing for infiltration of stormwater during a flood event, during a rainstorm, during snow melt. The true grid pavers are 40 to 60% void space. And those spaces will fill with water during a storm event and eventually infiltrate down into the lower layers. The fabric allows water to percolate into the subsoil at its normal rate. So the subsoil is not holding more water than it is able to. Open pore space collects a large volume of water without any issues whatsoever. And this entire project site is acting as a reservoir for stormwater runoff and flood events. So again, this picture shows the permeable pavers without that final top layer of uniform 1/2 inch diameter stone. You have your geotextile fabric. You also have your 3/4 of an inch stone that you can see in that photograph. So think of like the layers of a sandwich. That is how this green infrastructure was installed. Think of like a really delicious Italian sub. That is your green infrastructure for these true grid pavers. And I want to review the tangible outcomes of our project at Arrowhead Park. Decreased flooding at Arrowhead Park is one of the main results of this project. Before these pavers were installed, water would pool on the parking lot, it would pool in back of the municipal buildings, and it would flood right into the 4th and 5th Lake channel. So this puddling, this pooling has really been decreased. And this green infrastructure maintains the integrity of water quality surrounding the surface waters. And finally, our third tangible outcome is educational poster that our technician, Jamie Parslow, is working on. This poster will be printed in a large size and put up right at the project site to help our public learn about the benefits of this green infrastructure project. Okay, before we shift gears to our lake monitoring update, I think there's some questions in the chat box.
There.
Okay, Jamie, did you want to add anything? Oh, Jamie wrote that the location of the pavers were placed in 2 areas. Oh, there she is.
Sorry. Okay, sure. So thanks, Caitlin, for giving that really great overview. The location of the pavers was placed along the bathhouse, and in that area, the soil was super compacted, and going in, we really saved a lot of puddling that happens after storm events there. Because this water is now infiltrating into the ground, it's not running off into the parking lot, which is making less flooding happen down there. As far as the other questions that I saw come through, at this time, we don't have any plans to evaluate the lake for improvements in water quality. We do have a lot of baseline data on the Fulton chain of lakes, so I imagine we could see an improvement if something happened. We will definitely look for that. I know after talking to the town highway department and the parks department, they've noticed a huge increase in or a huge decrease rather in the amount of stormwater runoff that's flowing out of that top area of the park. And they have plans to install more of this throughout the parking lot, which is really, really great. Oh, sorry, I tape on. The kids are home, so they're all in my face all the time. So if that's better, now you can see my full face, maybe. So I don't have the exact measurements off the top of my head for how much green infrastructure we installed. I do know, doing a rough measurement, it could retain approximately 9,000 gallons of water from what Lenny and I measured out. So the intensity of the storm is a rather intense storm. It probably was dug a little too deep, but for our first time, we weren't sure what to do. And then it was good just to kind of stir up some of that compacted soil, and we had enough material to cover it. So yeah, it was a great project. The public's been super interested in it. The Parks Department at Arrowhead Park has gotten a lot of questions about it and everything. And I could go ahead and answer that question for you too, Jennifer. We approached the town to see if they needed any projects done to use that funding source that we had. And after talking with the supervisor, John Fry, and then the Parks Department and Highway, they had mentioned that they were having a lot of flooding issues within Arrowhead Park. So we kind of worked together, and that's when Lenny reached out to colleagues at Warren County and asked about green infrastructure ideas. And they came and looked, and we decided that this would be the best place to put it, and it's worked out really, really well. So that's kind of a quick little blurb.
Jamie, awesome. For our Part B funding, we receive that $6,000 annually, and we move that funding around the county. So we're working our way through each of our towns, and our technician, Lenny Croot, as Jamie mentioned, will reach out to the town supervisors, to the highway superintendents, to see if they have any ideas for a project. So as Jamie mentioned, last year, we selected the town of Inlet. Lenny worked with the town supervisors, with the Inlet Highway Department and the Parks and Rec to get this project installed to address the flooding, the pooling issue at the Arrowhead Town Park. This coming year, we're going to do a culvert for the town of Benson. So we're kind of moving that funding around our county. And Dan noted, we will certainly read each question in the next session before providing our answer. All right, are there any more questions before we shift gears to our lake monitoring program update? I'll give everyone a couple of beats here to type anything else in. Okay, does anyone recognize the lake in this first photo? I'll give you a hint. This is one of the lakes in the Fulton chain of lakes in the town of Inlet. Fourth Lake, right on, Emily, you win. I wish I had a prize for you. Dan chimed in with Fourth Lake too. Fantastic. So starting off with a program overview for our lake monitoring program. With great foresight, the Hamilton County Board of Supervisors recognized the need to protect Hamilton County's vital water resources. And in 1993, the Board of Supervisors contracted with the Hamilton County Soil and Water Conservation District to begin a lake monitoring program. And this data is publicly available for research, for lake management planning, and for anyone who is interested in sort of a history of water quality of their lakes. In 2019, we contracted with an environmental laboratory accreditation program lab, or an ELAP certified lab. And before that, we have used the excellent services provided by Paul Smith's Adirondack Watershed Institute to analyze our water samples for the lakes in our program. We monitor each lake at their deepest point from June through September. This year, we chose a cohort of 5 lakes and added a May and an October rotation as well, just for a more robust monitoring program. We monitor each of our 20 lakes at their deepest point for a variety of parameters, and these are listed on the right-hand side. Key ones being pH, sodium, chloride, transparency, and nutrients like total phosphorus and nitrite. So let me tell you, this is a really tough job. Jamie and I were out today on the lakes. It was a knockout day. She was bundled up with her hat on. I was taking off my shell and my long sleeve shirt. We're kind of polar opposites for the temperature, but we canoed into Fawn Lake, which is a lake that has no development on it. And we also monitored Spy Lake with kayaks today. So we have a couple days left to finish up our June rotation. And as I mentioned, we're collecting our water samples and all of our data from the deepest point of each lake. In the Fulton chain of lakes, we monitor a number of key lakes, including 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, and Limekiln, as well as 8th. So those are in the Black River watershed. So the Fulton chain of lakes, 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th, as well as Limekiln. Jamie was quite busy this winter creating story maps to display our lake monitoring results. Story maps are a relatively new platform for presenting data and information to the public. These story maps are created to tell the story of each lake's water quality. And as I mentioned, Jamie has made our 2020 data available, and these are showing trends and water quality parameters. I'm going to take a quick break from my PowerPoint and pop up our website that has the story maps on it. So let me see if I can share the right screen here. And we'll put this up and share. Wonderful. So can everyone see the Fulton chain of lakes story map?
Looks great.
Excellent. So again, this is focusing on lakes that we monitor in the Black River watershed. So we have a little description of the program on the left-hand side. These are study lakes for our entire monitoring program. And as I scroll down, Jamie has included the analytes and water quality indicators. And we have some great photos of our field collection process. There are all of our water samples in the refrigerator before we deliver them to either Rochester ALS, which is our ELAP certified lab, or we deliver our chlorophyll A samples to Paul Smith's Adirondack Watershed Institute. And then Jamie has broken down each lake, displaying the water quality parameters for the entire monitoring season by month, as well as averaging those parameters out. So all of this information is available for each lake. She's included lake trends, graphing the data with a descriptor at the bottom. And as I'm scrolling through, there are the pH trends. We've noticed that road salt is impacting a large percentage of our lakes. This is sort of the up and coming analyte that we're monitoring. We added sodium chloride a couple of years ago to enhance our lake monitoring program. And I want to scroll all the way down to the very end because Jamie has also included stewardship and best management practice information, how you can love your lake. She's linked lake associations for each watershed here, showcasing the great work that's being done at the local level, and aquatic invasive species that are on the move. Fulton Chain of Lakes has Eurasian water milfoil invading some of the lakes. And then she also has included watershed stewards and boat inspectors, and where the newest boat decon station is located. We like to say that we're one of the stewards' best best advocates. We're at their stations all the time. Whenever we see a boat wash station open, we're driving through. It's a great program, and just really, really wonderful to practice what we preach, to keep our boat clean, drained, and dried before launching into another site. And hopefully we are being a good model for everyone else, for the public, for our lake association. So I've got to give kudos to the Adirondack Watershed Institute's stewards and their program. So this is a snapshot of the Fulton Chain of Lakes. In the very top menu, it's broken down by watershed information, and then you can click on each of the lakes that are in that watershed for a more detailed analysis. And Jamie has also included an appendix at the very end of the story map. And I'm going to pop back into my PowerPoint presentation. Bear with me here. We all should be Zoom experts by now, but sometimes it's still challenging to navigate this. Okay, here we go. Let me pop back up into full screen here. Okay, Emily, yes, I will pop the link into the story maps in the chat once I conclude my presentation here. So, new for our 2021 monitoring program. As I mentioned, Jamie decided that it would be beneficial to start our program in May and extend it through October. This is allowing our team to collect a more robust set of data. So in May, we kicked off the monitoring season, and we monitored 7th Lake, Limekiln Lake, Sacandaga Lake, Fawn Lake, and Algonquin. And we'll hit those 5 lakes again in October, and she will be totally bundled up. I may have just a simple outer shell on. And we monitor 20 lakes in June through September. As I said, really hard job. It's really fantastic to be on these lakes, collect this data, and really make this a resource for our landowners, for our lake associations, and for our partners. This year, additional analytes were added to our data set, and these include ammonium and total nitrogen. And again, these updates are making our program more robust, and we're more closely following what New York State is doing with their water quality programs. So while I include a link for our story maps, are there any questions? I'm going to put that right in the chat box now, Emily. Great idea. Thank you. Richard inquired, what is the data telling you about the health of these lakes? And Jamie can go more in depth our water quality is quite good in Hamilton County. In a nutshell, we have noticed road salt impacts, and that's the reason why we added sodium and chloride recently. We also noticed that transparency is decreasing. Jamie, do you have anything to add, or would you like to go more in depth? I know that this is your jam.
Sure, I could talk for a few minutes. I just wanted to say thank you to Dan first for the encouraging words about the story maps. They were truly a winter project that were a lot of fun to do. And then as far as what the data is telling us about the lakes, the district has been collecting data for over 25 years. So what we have is a really comprehensive long-term data set. So it's not really telling us anything year to year. It's letting us continue to monitor trends to see how things are changing. Like Caitlin said, and like I'm sure a lot of we're really starting to notice an increase in sodium and chloride concentrations, especially with lakes that have a lot of state roads in their watersheds. We're noticing that decrease in transparency and a couple other things, but it's all just about what the trends are saying. We haven't really picked up anything shocking. There's not a single time where I could think we go out on the lake and it's like, oh my God, that's crazy. Something incredible is happening right now, or something terrible is happening. But it's really important to just keep collecting that data month after month, just so we have, the full trends to tell the story of what is changing over time, because all of these changes, they're very subtle and they take time. So that's pretty much that. Are there any more questions? And I just want to say thank you to Caitlin for presenting all of this today. I was initially supposed to do the presentation, but then I just had a lot of stuff come up that got really, really busy. And, with the kids being home and everything, it's been kind of hectic. So I really appreciate Caitlin stepping up and doing this presentation in my place.
It was great to have you here. I was so happy that you were here to answer the questions. Thanks for joining us, Jamie.
Yeah, I'm glad I was able to tune in last minute as well.
I see there's a lot of comments on, outstanding, and it is outstanding work, and, proud to, have your work shown as a, example of soil and water conservation districts across the state. So great work, ladies. Does anybody else have any more questions for Caitlin or Jamie? We'll give it just a second. In the meantime, again, a great big thank you. I look forward to seeing the results every year, and hopefully seeing chloride go down every year. And at this point, I think we'll move to the second presentation. Our second presentation is by Catherine Wickham and Robert Tilby of Herkimer County Soil and Water Conservation District. They'll present Stream Bank Stabilization, Stake Your Bank, an overview of a partnered project with Herkimer County BOCES Conservation Class, Herkimer County Highway Department, and the Herkimer County Soil and Water Conservation District. This project utilizes Streamco Willow stakes as part of a larger stream bank stabilization project. At this point, I will give it over to Katie.
Hey, thanks, Michelle, and thank you to Jennifer and Hamilton County. Great presentation. I will try to share my screen and get myself in the 21st century. Let's see. Okay. So first of all, hello, my name is Katie. Bob is here with me too. And we work for the Herkimer County Soil and Water Conservation District. Thank you to everybody who signed up for this webinar. And we're here to present to you on Stake Your Bank, utilizing live willows for stream bank stabilization. And Bob was really the main lead on this project. So I'm mostly just here to introduce everything. So for this stream bank stabilization project, the goals are basically to conserve and preserve the quality of our water resources, stabilizing the soil to prevent erosion, prevent sediment and contaminants from entering our waterways. And really the reason we do all of this is to preserve the water quality of the county and the Black River watershed, for wildlife habitat, drinking water, and obviously everybody loves to recreate. This project was actually a post-flood county road stabilization project in the town of Newport in Herkimer County, and it's actually not located in the Black River watershed, but we thought it would still be a great project to present on because any of these practices could be implemented pretty much anywhere, and you'll see it later on in more of our description on really why and how. So after the large storm event on Halloween of 2019 occurred, White Creek washed out a bank and a part of the adjacent road. County Highway Department stepped in and worked together with a private engineering firm and a private construction company to complete this project to FEMA parameters. And because this was such a large project, that's why FEMA got involved. And, we were all glad for their help. So this right here is a photo of some of the damage on White Creek. Even through the snow, you can really see the major damage that occurred. Lots and lots of bank undercutting. I don't know if you can see my mouse or not, but I'm going to point with it. And this huge bed load deposition on the right-hand side up here. And then below is just another angle of the same White Creek, just really emphasizing this undercutting that occurred. White Creek is a priority water body. This is because it is designated as a Class CT protected trout stream. And this DEC designation really just indicates that there is habitat that may support trout populations. And White Creek is also a tributary to the West Canada Creek. And that's a well-renowned trout stream in central New York here. This project started with extensive work to rebuild the roadway, and then also created a functioning floodplain to dissipate the energy of the water around the stream bend. Now, when the stream velocity is too high, the power of the water can be too great for the stream bank to hold. The floodplain really helps to alleviate this. Floodplains are critical in preventing erosion by providing space for the water to spread out and slow down when the stream channel cannot handle the water capacity. So those are really the main points to this project. Just some photos to more familiarize you with the project. The first photo here is post-storm event, so pre-construction, and you can see in the left photo how the road was really severely damaged and undercut and became a safety hazard. And then this second photo shows post-construction and how the bank slope was rebuilt here, as well as this is a floodplain right along the stream, and the stream bed itself was also reconstructed. And this was all built to engineering standards per design. So where do we come in as a soil and water district? We already have a great working relationship with our county highway department. We really try to keep our partnership going with them for many different projects. Specifically, we work with them closely for hydro seeding and our Japanese knotweed invasive species project. So because of that, they went ahead and reached out to us for assistance in completing this bank stabilization project, specifically for us to install willow stakes to add some more soil stabilization. Herkimer County BOCES conservation class actually maintains 2 Streamco willow plantations on their property, and those are there primarily for live willow stake cuttings and also just as an extra educational resource for those BOCES students. And County Highway happens to also be aware of the great relationship we have with the BOCES conservation class. They help us with our tree and shrub program that we have every year. We help with grading some of their classes. So it's just one more great partnership that we like to share. the district received approval from our Water Quality Coordinating Committee to provide the willows and actually do the physical labor of it, installing them at this location. And this approved the use of, Caitlin mentioned this before, we also were in the Finger Lakes, Lake Ontario Watershed Protection Alliance, and our Water Quality Coordinating Committee approved us to use some funds for equipment and also the many hours it took to plan and coordinate and install these willow stakes. Here on the right-hand side is a picture of one of the willow plants, actually right from the plantation on Bosie's property. Just some more basic information. The district worked with the natural resources instructor at Bosie's to establish 2 Streamco Willow plantations on that Bosie's property way back in the 90s. Doesn't sound like a long time ago to me, but I guess maybe it's getting to be now. And those 2 willow plantations have been managed and maintained by the Bosie's conservation classes since then. And although this here is the willows that we use, the Streamco willows, it's not what you might picture for a willow. It's not just a standalone tree that's like a weeping tree or anything like that. These Streamco willows have 2 basic uses. One is for biofuels because they grow back so quickly. They can be used as like wood chips for biofuels, and then also for stream bank stabilization, which is, you know, our main purpose for them. And these 2 plantations have been used for many stream bank stabilization projects throughout the county and neighboring counties for many years. So why do we want to use these willows? There's a lot of benefits to Streamco willows. They grow really fast, honestly, up to 8 feet in only 2 years. It's pretty fast in my opinion anyway. And they also sprout really fast. So this picture on the left here is actually one of the stakes that we installed in this project. And it's showing some sprouting growth after only 3 weeks of installation. And Bob's going to go into more detail about exactly how we did that. And willows can be harvested over and over again, so they're very renewable and easily accessible for us. They establish very easily because they can grow in a variety of soil types and conditions, but typically prefer the wet areas, which is why they're great for stream banks. And the root systems, once established, and because they grow so fast, really help hold the bank in place for stabilization purposes. And they actually can grow to a maximum height of about 20 feet. And once they're really well established and are that large, they provide better fish habitat with their shade in the stream. So just a lot of great benefits for using these Streamco willows. And now I'm actually going to turn it over to Bob, and he's going to go into more detail. Thank you.
Thank you, Katie. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. I really appreciate y'all being here and listening to us. Today, I'm going to go into a little more detail about this project and specifically how to install these willow stakes. Willow stakes can be cut into various lengths depending on site conditions. That's what will determine your length. When we cut them, we look for them to be between 3/4 of an inch to 1.5 inches in diameter. You can cut multiple stakes from one stem. So these willows, they have to grow in the same direction that they're planted. So we cut the top of them flat and the bottom of them at an angle. And what that does is it just allows us to keep track of which end goes in the ground. So after you cut them, you should keep them in a bucket of water right side up until they're installed to prevent the stakes from drying out. We use these 5-gallon pails. So you might be wondering, well, if I were to use willow stakes, how many would I need and where would I install them? We created this willow stake planting guide to help answer those questions. The top illustration shows 2 rows of willow stakes pictured as the green dots. And we recommend to plant them 2 feet apart within a row, and then space the rows 2 feet apart as well in a staggered pattern. We try to plant the first row as close to the water level as possible. This is indicated on the top illustration as well as the cross-section view below. What that does is it allows the willow stake to have closer contact with the water so they stay hydrated and they don't dry out. That bottom illustration also shows that it's ideal to install the willow stakes perpendicular to the stream bank face, and 2/3 of the stake should be embedded into the ground, just like it shows, as well as depending on where you're planting on the stream bank face, you'll need longer or shorter stakes to achieve this. So in order to complete a project like this, you need a few hand tools. And on the left here, these are the tools that we used. We used 5-gallon pails. They work great for transporting the stakes as well as keeping the stakes submerged in water. We used quite a few 5-gallon pails, and they're also helpful in providing some sort of way to keep track of how many stakes you're cutting and installing. We can fit about 50 stakes in each bucket, so that's what we use to keep track and to know that we planted 2,000 stakes on this project. You also need loppers to cut the willows into their desired lengths and cut the stem. Another great tool that's very handy is metal stake or rebar to create the pilot holes for the stakes in tight soil or rocky soil, and that just prevents damaging the stakes during installation. We use 2 types of hammers. We use a metal 4-pound hammer to drive the rebar into the ground for the pilot hole, and then we use a dead blow hammer to drive the willow stake in. That's just a little more delicate on the willow stakes and it prevents the top of the stake from mushrooming out. The 2 pictures on the right are of our district manager, Jerry. He's in one of the plantations cutting the willow stems. He's looking for stems between 3/4 of an inch to 1.5 inches in diameter. And he's cutting them approximately 12 inches to 18 inches above ground level. And what that does is it allows enough stem above the ground so that way new sprouts will shoot off of it and grow additional stems for future harvesting. These photos over here show us after we've cut all of the stems. Just do a step-by-step process, cut all the stems, and now you can cut your willow stakes. That's what we did. We figured out what length we needed based on our site conditions and where we intended to plant them. So then we went through, cut all of the stakes, and just like I said earlier, they have to be installed in the same way that they're grown. So this is the point where we're cutting the angle at the bottom and cutting the top of the stake flat. And here the bottom right shows them submerged in a 5-gallon pail with water. Here's a couple pictures of us laying out the rows on the floodplain bench, and we're utilizing that 2-foot by 2-foot staggered spacing that I mentioned earlier. I had never installed willow stakes before, so I didn't know how other people did it. How do you install 2,000 willow stakes and measure between every single stake to maintain that spacing? We didn't do that, so we ended up coming up with a wooden jig out of a few hardwood stakes that we had laying around. We cut a couple sections into 2-foot pieces and screwed them together into a T, added another stake for a handle, and then that gave us our wooden jig that we could then just place on the ground and drive our pilot holes in with the proper spacing and install our stakes. And what this also does is it allows us to lay out the first row and the second row at the same time. You can see that we're installing the first row as close to the rocks as possible in this circumstance. We wanted to get close to the rocks while still being far enough away that we're in the soil and it's providing adequate soil contact with the willows, and we're not just driving them into the ground, into rocks below the soil. And that rebar helped us create those pilot holes to do that. Here's a quick animation of how we use that wooden jig. The green dots are our stakes, and there's the wooden tee. And all we did is we're able to line up our tee, put in our first 3 stakes, and then we can just slide the jig right down and install another 2 and then another 2. And then when you're done with the first 2 rows, you can just place it in between the willow stakes already installed on the 2nd row, and then that'll give you your point to install your 3rd row. Now, that jig was super helpful for installing 2,000 stakes. There's a lot of smaller projects that wouldn't need something like this, but it made it go by much quicker for us. I just wanted to mention that we're installing these willow stakes along the outside bank of the stream bend. This is where water velocity would be highest and have the greatest potential for soil erosion. Here's a couple pictures of us installing the willow stakes along the toe slope of the bank. We're using the same spacing as the floodplain bench, as well as we're also installing 3 rows again. Now the difference here is we're using different length stakes. We use shorter stakes at the bottom of the bank, and then the longer stakes at on the top rows. We had to be a little creative here in how we installed these. Like I said, we hadn't really, we're fairly new technicians, so we had never really installed these willow stakes before. So we came up with some ways. Jerry here, he's using a tool that we made so that way he didn't have to bend over so much to put the stakes in the ground. He's able to pound on the top of the tool instead of the bottom of the stake. Katie and I decided to sit on the bank and drive the stakes in with the hammers right between our legs. And with every swing of the hammer, we were scooting right down the slope. The slope, these pictures don't really do it justice as to how steep that slope was. I've already mentioned it, but I just wanted to say again that the pilot holes are very important to keep the willow stakes from damaging them. That 3/4 inch pointed steel rebar pin that we used was very helpful. We drove that into the ground with the 4-pound hammer where it was necessary. It just snaked through the rocks, so that way it created a path for us to put the willow stake into the ground. And when you're creating the pilot hole, you want it to be approximately 2/3 the length of the willow stake deep. And that 3/4 inch rebar pin is great because it keeps the hole slightly narrower than the willow diameter. Like I said, we prefer to cut our willows between 3/4 of an inch to 1.5 inches thick. So it allows the soil to remain tight around the willow stake. And that just makes it more opportunity for soil contact with the willow and a better chance of survival. Here's another district technician, Tyler, installing willow stakes using that dead blow hammer. I want to emphasize how important it is to not damage the top of the willow stakes when you're installing them. If you use a harder hammer or pounding on them a lot, they will mushroom out and split at the top, and that just makes for more opportunity for them to dry out much more quickly, and they won't have a chance to establish. So one way to alleviate this is to just take those loppers and lop off the damaged portion, and then you have a nice clean flat surface again, and that prevents them from drying out so quickly. Last time, do not plant them upside down. Upside down, they will not grow. Now, here's just a couple pictures of those tools again that we used. They're real back savers. There's Jerry pounding on the top of the tool rather than leaning over and pounding on top of the stake. Now, Katie had mentioned that a private construction company completed much of the work on this project, and sometime after the completion of the project, one of the erosion control mats had folded up on itself, and when we were out there installing the stakes, we noticed this, so we were able to just unravel it, flatten it back out, and use a few willow stakes to hold it back in place. Now, I want to mention here that our project started a little late, so we did not install these willow stakes during their ideal time of installing them. We installed them a little late. The ideal time would be when they are dormant in either early spring or late fall. So we also incurred a little bit of dry weather during this time. And in order to improve their chance of survival, we chose to water the willow stakes. And we used a bucket brigade method. It was all hands on deck. All 5 staff members went out in the field, and we had one of us filling up buckets right on White Creek, and then another one of us carrying the buckets across the rock and handing them to the people on the floodplain bench so they could water each individual willow. At this point, we had about 1,000 willows installed. So although it was effective because we were pouring water directly on each willow, it was quite slow and not very efficient. So how on earth would we water 2,000 willows? We had to do a little bit of brainstorming, and our district manager ended up coming up with the idea to use our district trash pump and our hoses. So this was a much more fun way to water them, and it ended up being very effective as well as far more efficient than bucketing the water. We used this method to water all 2,000 willows. Now, we said that we did this because of the timing and the weather, and we were a little concerned with if these willows would establish. So were they successful? This willow on the left here is very green. That is all new growth. Within 3 weeks of the first willow stakes being installed, some were already starting to show new growth of leaves. That picture there was taken probably at about 3 weeks after it was installed. This showed that most of these would be successful. But that being said, we're going to continue to monitor the site and monitor the willows. We're going to expect that they're not all going to survive and establish. We'll probably have to come back in the fall or in the spring and replace some of them that didn't make it, especially if they're in large groups, because we don't want to compromise that soil. We want to fill that in with more willow stakes that hopefully will establish and have the root systems hold the soil in place. Here's just a photo, another photo of that's 5 weeks after we installed them. It's just how much growth that they can have. Katie said they grow very quickly, and in this circumstance, they were establishing quickly as well. A couple more photos here. That's all new growth, everything that's green there.
It really made us feel good to see that all of our labor
Yes.
was successful after all.
Yes. So maybe you're thinking, sitting here, you've listened to us go on for a half hour now. Maybe you're thinking of any projects that could benefit from Streamco willows that you might have. Each year we get contacted by landowners who are concerned with eroded stream banks, and we're able to provide them willows with the help of the BOCES conservation class. We use them on small erosion projects. They're great in those circumstances to hold the soil in place when hard armoring isn't economically feasible, or maybe you just want to keep it more natural. The willows are also provide us with great opportunities for our continued partnerships with municipalities if they reach out to us, like County Highway did, as well as neighboring soil and water conservation districts. So if you're interested in some of these willows, get a hold of your local soil and water district and see if they have them. If not, maybe they can get a hold of us and we can help facilitate that. Does anybody have any questions?
Feel free to take down our phone number here or email address.
There were actually quite a few questions
Okay.
on here. I'll start off with Caitlin's. And that was, were any permits required for this project?
No, they were not for our purposes. We did not do any of that construction. So I would assume that permits were required for all of that construction that went on. That wasn't handled in our office. That was either handled by the county highway department or the private engineering firm or construction company. For our purposes, we fell under any permitting that they already had in place.
Okay. Another request was, could you provide a link to your willow stake planting guide?
I sure can do that.
That would be
Absolutely.
great. Let's see. Also from Caitlin is, did you use coconut blankets for your erosion control mats? I can't hear her. I can only hear. Okay.
That was not part of our participation in this project. It does not look like, looking at that project, I don't know what they used, but we didn't deal with that part. So I don't know the answer to that.
Okay. Do you know what your survival rate was, what your survival percentage on the willows were?
I do not yet. Some of those pictures were taken yesterday and then thrown into this presentation. So I do not know that yet. But that's a great question, and we will try to evaluate that.
Okay. Lots more coming in, so hold on.
All right.
Jen had asked, Jen Harville, have deer wildlife been an issue?
I would have to ask the landowner. I do not believe so. There's some other things around in that area that are more enticing than the willows.
Okay. And then Patricia Schulenberg had asked, have you considered a variety of species as opposed to just the Streamco Willow?
We haven't looked into it more simply because we have great access to those plantations, and we could never use all of those willows from those plantations for our projects. But I have heard of other species. I'm trying to think at the moment right now. I don't know if dogwood is another one of those types of species that would do the same thing.
I have heard that, red osier dogwood.
Yeah. But we have only used the Streamco willows.
Okay. We have a question from Richard Waite. How long are the stakes viable after they've been harvested?
If you keep them submerged in the water, some people actually harvest them, I believe, like in late fall and might overwinter them while they're dormant. But in our circumstance, we probably wouldn't have wanted to leave them submerged in water for more than a week. We planted them the same day that we harvested them, but I know they can last possibly about a week.
Okay. And then also, we have Katie and Bonham, phenomenal presentation with great information. Thank you. And from Richard Waite again, how was the 2-foot spacing determined?
We've looked at standard and specs from, I believe I've pulled some off of possibly DOT and some other sources. And they say, from what we found, approximately 18 inches to 2 feet for spacing. And that's basically what we utilize to determine that. I would likely have to do with their root structure, and is my assumption.
Okay. And from Dan Kelting, does planting willows provide any benefits to other native streamside vegetation to come in naturally?
That's a great question, Dan. I honestly do not know the answer to that.
Okay. That's okay.
Sorry, Dan.
And then I think we have one more. Well, we do have consider seed. Patricia Schulenberg had asked, oops, We got so many coming in. Consider seeding also in the Willow areas.
Yes, so that was part of the private construction company. All of that you saw there was straw laid down and it was seeded. In this circumstance, I think it was a late seeding and it was not very successful. And since then, I've talked to County Highway and they are reaching out to the private construction company to reseed that project. But yes, all of that you see there with the erosion control mats on the bank and the floodplain bench was seeded.
Okay. Jen had put a note in there if there's anybody else that has any questions and would prefer to speak. I think Caitlin has raised hand, and then Patricia has provided a link. I cheat for spacing sometimes, estimate quantities, and has provided a Midwest ground cover plant calculator.
Oh, thank you.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
So yes, have to check.
Bob and Katie, awesome information. Thank you. We just did our very first bioengineering project with willow stakes on the Marion Brook. So I was very excited to learn the nuts and bolts of what you have been doing. Can you speak, please, more to the relationship you have with BOCES, how
Yes.
that was established, and also how popular is your landowner program? How many requests do you receive a year, or how many willow stakes do you give out a year for your landowners? I think that's awesome.
Sure. Thank you, Caitlin. That's a great questions. I don't have a ton of knowledge on how it was established, but from looking in what we have documented, the previous district manager worked with the previous natural resources instructor to make this happen on BOCES property. I'm not sure of the funding sources or why it even came about. I think there was just a mutual interest in it, one for educational purposes for the conservation classes, as well as the soil and water's ability to be able to utilize these willow stakes and provide them to landowners. I've seen some numbers in past years of approximately 10 landowners a year reaching out to the district for willow stakes. And I've already had interest with probably 2 or 3 landowners this year, not including the county highway department for willow stakes. This is a little bit of a large project, an abnormal year. They have 2,000 willow stakes for one project. Normally, maybe we'll see, yes, a couple of hundred for one project that a landowner is interested in. So maybe we'll see 500 to 1,000 in a year that we could provide to landowners. That would be more of a regular number that we would see. And what we'll do with the BOCES conservation class, depending on their availability, we'll contact the conservation class instructor. And then if we have landowners interested, then we'll reach out to him. And if he has time, he'll make an entire a class on how to cut them, install them, and then it provides the educational benefit for the students as well.
Okay, we have one more presentation or one more comment. Great presentations, everyone. This is from Dan Kelting, super informative. You're doing important work to protect the clean water. I have to sign off, but thanks for this webinar and great to see you. Thanks for presenting, Katie and Bob's from Emily.
Thank you so much.
Thank you guys for tuning in and signing up for this webinar.
And if I could, Jennifer, if I could get like a PDF of that planting guide over to you, would you be able to add that to the website?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yep,
great.
I can do that. And thanks to everybody for hanging on with us. We went a little over, but I think all this information was so important. Thanks to Caitlin, Bob, Jamie, Katie, and thank you to everybody that joined us today and for caring about the water in our watershed. Again, pay attention to your follow-up links. We read all the feedback. We'd love to hear from you, and I really hope we can see you in person. Michelle, anybody else have any closing remarks?
Just a great presentation. I enjoy when you guys give presentations, see what fellow soil and water conservation districts are doing, and presenting that to the communities where they can see, we can do this in your watershed too. So thank you very much.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, ladies. Thank you.
Great job.